Hi everyone, and welcome to my first video in this new series. So in this series, I'm going to have kind of shorter little kind of videos compared to my fuller length videos that will touch on one topic or misconception or question that people might have in relation to science and faith, specifically Christianity. So let's begin. And this one is going to be on reductionism and the image of God. So, as someone with a chemistry background, I am not here to say chemistry is unimportant. Quite the opposite. Chemistry is woven into every part of embodied life. But the question is whether chemistry is the whole story. Science could tell us a great deal about the human body. For example, genes influence tendencies. Or, say, when you remember someone you love, there are neural processes involved then. When you feel anxious, there are chemicals involved. When you feel joy, there are chemicals involved. None of this should surprise us. We are embodied creatures. But when someone says that's just chemistry, what do they mean by just? So this is the main distinction that we're going to address in this topic. We're going to talk about mechanism and meaning and how they aren't equal. So what is reductionism? So reductionism takes a true partial explanation and treats it as the whole explanation. Now, I want to say that there is a good kind of reduction in science. Chemists reduce complicated substances to atoms, bonds, and reactions. Biologists look at cells. Neuroscientists look at brain regions. That's not the problem. The problem is when a method becomes a worldview. So, for example, if you look at my picture, you can learn a lot about a duck by studying its parts. But if you reduce the duck to just a diagram of parts, you've not captured the whole reality of the living creature. And this is the problem with reductionism. Now, you may have heard the phrase nothing but. Well, nothing but often sounds scientific, but is usually more philosophical work that's being done. So, for example, here's a true scientific description. Love involves hormones, brain activity, attachment, and embodied emotion. But as love involves hormones, this is a scientific claim. So, this is a scientific explanation. Now, in regards to a reductionist claim, love is nothing but hormones and brain chemistry. This is actually a worldview claim. The science has not proven the word only. The word only is being added on top of the science. So, like I said, the problem is not the science, it's the way that the science is being used in a worldview perspective. So I'm going to try to kind of give you some examples. I'm not going to cover every area of human life. That would be kind of impossible given our idea of having a short video. But I want to take kind of 3 examples of things that almost everyone recognizes as deeply human. So love, morality, and beauty. And we're going to look at those. So look at love versus nothing but chemicals, morality versus nothing but survival strategy, and beauty versus nothing but brain response. The question is not whether chemistry is involved. The question is whether chemistry is the whole story. As a chemist, I love chemistry. However, sometimes Christians accidentally sound like the body is a problem and that the spiritual part is the only thing that matters. But that's not biblical Christianity. In Genesis, the physical world is called good. God says this is a good creation. In the incarnation, Jesus Christ takes on a real human body. In the resurrection, the Christian hope is not escaping the body forever, but a resurrection life. So I'm not arguing for less embodiment. Embodiment matters. I'm arguing against mere embodiment. It's more than just that. So let's talk about some levels of explanation. So if I said, why is the water boiling? You could say from a chemistry explanation, well, heat increases the molecular motion, and that allows for the boiling and a lot more deeper explanation. But just in general, heat increases the molecular motion, which causes the water to boil. Agency. So I turned on the kettle. Why is the water boiling? Because I did something. So an agent caused it. Purpose. Why is the water boiling? I want some tea. Or why is the water boiling in a relationship standpoint? I'm making tea for a friend. So if I ask why the water is boiling, this chemistry answer is true. But that does not make the other answers false. So in the same way, saying this emotion involves brain chemistry does not erase the personal, the relational, moral, or spiritual level of explanation. So a lower level explanation is not automatically a deeper explanation. Or another way we could say this is a lower level explanation can be true without erasing a higher level explanation. And so that's one thing that we want to make sure that we keep kind of in our heads when we're thinking through these ways of explaining something. So like I said, I wanted to go through those three parts. So I wanted to talk about kind of love, morality, and beauty. So let's talk about love. So love has chemistry, but chemistry does not make love unreal. So let's look at this. So if we're talking about it from a chemistry standpoint, you see this picture here. It's a nice, big, happy, exciting hug. So a hug involves nerves, pressure receptors, hormones, memory, and emotion. But the person receiving the hug doesn't say, oh, that was only oxytocin. Thank you for my hug. They recognize that there's something deeper than just the chemistry behind that hug. So, yes, the chemistry is important, the mechanism matters, but the meaning behind it also matters. So, there's both have a part to it, but we can't just define love by the mechanism itself. That would be reductionism. We have to go to those other meanings. Okay, what about morality? So, evolutionary psychology may help explain why humans develop certain social instincts. Neuroscience may show what happens in the brain when we make moral judgments. But neither one by itself tells us whether something is truly good or evil. So, for example, if someone sacrifices themselves to save a stranger, reductionism can describe the possible survival advantages, social instincts for them doing that, or brain responses. But most of us recognize that something morally meaningful has happened. And science can describe moral behavior, but it cannot by itself create moral obligation. So that's that moral foundation. So it can kind of describe it, but it cannot create it. So that's this difference between the part and the whole. All right, let me give you another example. Beauty. So a painting is made of pigments. A poem is made out of ink if you're handwriting it, or pixels if you're typing it. Or for example, here, a song. A song is made out of sound waves, frequencies, and neural responses. These are the ways that we could describe it. But no one thinks that they have understood a symphony, pardon me, simply because they describe the frequencies. Beauty is not less real because it's experienced through physical processes. We would talk about the description separately from the experience. So, what can reductionism not explain well? So, where do they have issues? When the word only takes over, several things become really hard to preserve. So, let's look at kind of four things that if we're talking about only the parts, only chemistry, how would we be able to deal with that? So, for example, for dignity, if we are only chemistry, Why should every human being be equally valued? Why would we equally value the weak, the sick, the disabled, the unborn, elderly, or the inconvenient? Why would they all matter equally? How about responsibility? If every action is only the result of chemistry and environment, then praise, blame, guilt, repentance, and justice become difficult to ground. Why would we have those terms if it's only about the result of chemistry and environment? How about rationality? If our thoughts are aimed only at survival, then why can we assume they're aimed at truth as well? And meaning. If love, beauty, and purpose are only useful illusions, then why do we find it almost impossible to live as if they are not real? So reductionism can't really explain these things. However, the Christian view of the human person can. It's not less than chemistry. We're not saying it's less than chemistry. We're saying it's more than chemistry. So, for example, embodied. Our physical life is real and good from a Christian perspective. Relational. Love is more than a reaction. Moral. Good and evil are not illusions. Rational. The minds can aim at truth. And spiritual. Humans bear the image of God. So, from a Christian perspective, we are more than chemistry. Christianity gives us a layered view of the human person. We are physical, but not merely physical. We are biological, but not merely biological. We are social, moral, rational, and spiritual beings. The image of God does not mean we are less embodied. It means our embodied lives carry dignity, purpose, and moral meaning. So, a chemical description of a person can be true and still be incomplete. Humans are made of chemistry, but we are not merely chemistry. Science describes mechanisms, but Christianity gives a fuller account of meaning, dignity, and purpose. So thank you. That's just a brief overview of kind of the challenges of the reductionist worldview and perspective. Here are just a few of the references for this talk, and I hope you join me in listening to my other short talks. Also, you can go to some of my longer talks on various deeper topics as well.